Yeah, sorry. I feel like I had...
I'm so sorry. I feel like I bring down your, like, eloquence with my, like, that Hello everyone, my name is Lisa and I'm the Viet vegan because I'm Viet and I'm vegan, and today we have Emily. Emily is from This Rawsome Vegan Life. Why don't you tell us about your journey to veganism? Tell us about yourself.
I don't even really remember like why I became vegan, but I was like 16 and I think I learned about like raw food. It just like really resonated with me at the time. I was very into like clean eating and whatever. Looking back on it now I cringe because it's just all kind of like ridiculous like pseudoscience-y stuff and just like
I think we all kind of like go through that.
Yeah, so that's how I started and it took me a while to get out of that, but now I'm just in a place where like I'm mostly vegan for like ethical reasons, for environmental reasons, and then like yes, eating plants makes me feel good, but it's not really a part of it, and it's just more of like a political decision and stuff like that.
How long have you been vegan?
Like so 6-ish, 7 years, and I also want to say I'm working on like 4-ish hours of sleep because I couldn't sleep last night for whatever reason. So
we also stayed up till like 3 watching The
Bachelor, which never regret. It was so good.
It was excellent. All right, in case you guys are wondering, we are drinking a blueberry smoothie, right?
There's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot. There's acai berry, orange, lemon juice.
Yeah, maca, moringa. You can really taste the maca, and I didn't even add that much.
I like it though. Just basically a hodgepodge of things that I had in my fridge. A watermelon, frozen watermelon.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, and for tea, we're drinking some turmeric tea. Today we're gonna talk about veganism and privilege. This is something that I've wanted to talk to you guys about a lot. So I have Emily here, very knowledgeable about the topic, but also, I mean, like, I remember when you like first discovered like privilege, like you like blasted it on all of the social medias, and you were just kind of like, oh my god, this is a thing, this is awful, but like you did it in a way that was like very like, I've benefited from all this shit. I'm so sorry,
right?
Like we need to like make this better type thing. And like I thought you were one of the first people in the vegan community that I knew of that was like very vocal about like vegan privilege, because like a lot of people don't really like to talk about it because it's just like, yeah, it is a privilege,
right? Or they don't even recognize it.
Yeah, or that too. It's something that is really important to talk about because as much as we advocate for veganism and it's something that we really truly believe in, and that it's an excellent lifestyle to live ethically in line with your moral values, there are definitely some barriers, and I think that it's important to address them so that we can not like circumvent them, help you with arguments that people may have had. And this kind of also ties into how veganism is intersectional, because privilege is not just a vegan issue, it is something that is a global issue, especially in our capitalist patriarchal society.
Yes, like in the world that we are living in, like veganism requires food access and often like fresh food access, although not necessarily. Like vegan junk food is great too. And so food access has to do so much with privilege, and privilege has to do with what identities you have and which ones you don't, and that's totally intersectional with other things. And like we'll get into this, but like as a white person, like I have just more privilege, I have generally more access to stuff, and so food access is one of those things.
Other than, you know, accessibility to food, like what are some other barriers to veganism that you can see that like require privilege?
I think something that I've been thinking about a little bit lately is that for me, in the context I'm about to talk about, it was just another way it was easy for me to be vegan. Being like comfortably affluent and having like fresh food access and access to transportation and educational resources about veganism, that all matters as well. But then even specifically just switching from the foods I was eating before to vegan foods, I wasn't really giving up anything because basically as a white person I have no food culture, and I can feel the people like getting offended out there, but like really so much of the food I was eating was appropriated during colonialism, and there are not foods I want to celebrate. Like for example, like pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, turkey at Thanksgiving, like cranberries. Those were foods that we took from indigenous nations during colonialism. And then other foods too, like I'm sure we can point to a lot, and just we can find their history and find and find just aspects of it being appropriated from other nations, from other regions. It's not even really whatever traditional to like my white identity or whatever. And like the foods that I grew up eating, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, were like frozen burritos, pizza, pasta, like wraps, sandwiches. I don't know, just like
when I think about that, that's all like appropriate from other cultures, and then like fast food processed frozen for like white consumption.
Exactly, commodified into like the capitalist, format.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, so it's
so
like
problematic.
Right. My identity was not wrapped up in like frozen burritos. It wasn't like a food history that was tightly knit to like my culture, like my family's history, my ancestry in any way. So it wasn't like a big deal to stop eating non-vegan frozen burritos. I could just switch over to like vegan frozen burritos. And so that's my experience. And I think what's more important to talk about is like me really having no important like food culture history. It's just not there to think of. But then you, and like we were talking about this last night, you're like, oh yeah, there's these like food traditions and like ceremonies around food that I have with my family and stuff. And so like that's a bigger challenge for you.
In Vietnamese culture, in weddings, there are a lot of meat-centric dishes that are very common. One of the biggest things that I can think of is like there's like just like a big fried pig in the middle, and it's like it still looks like a pig. It's just a fried crispy it's just like I just think about it and it just like hurts me. And I remember even as a kid I was kind of like, ew. That is symbolic in Vietnamese culture. It's not just because like people just want a pig. I was kind of thinking like when I want to get married one day, if I want to have like a Vietnamese traditional wedding, like what do I do? Because there are so many foods that are traditional in Vietnamese weddings that like I don't want to serve. As much as veganism is very accepted in Vietnamese culture because of Buddhism, there are a lot of cultural barriers and stigmas, I guess, like perceptions of like what meat represents and like protein and all that kind of stuff. But as you said, there's a lot of like food that is tied into Vietnamese culture because like Vietnamese is like a coastal region. It is very based around seafood and fish. And so it's like really hard to enjoy a lot of the dishes that my family would make before because they were, fish based or like seafood based or like they had very significant things. And like, yeah, you can find like vegan dupes or whatever, but it's like, it's one more thing that I have to veganize to convince my parents that like, this is a lifestyle that I want to live, and this is like, I can still be Vietnamese within this culture. Speaking of representing your identity, like I find that there are very few representatives out there that are non-white vegans. For example, a lot of very prominent Instagram vegans, like a lot of them happen to be Asian, but like the food that they share is not usually Asian, and like they rarely rarely represent themselves, if that makes any sense. Like it's not like on YouTube where I'm like, I am like it's me talking to you and I am sharing my culture with you guys. Like on Instagram it's just like photo of a smoothie bowl, photo of a fruit platter, like
butternut squash mac and cheese, which is delicious, but
yeah, like not to say that like quote unquote white people food isn't delicious, like
the cultural significance isn't there. There's not as much like tying.
Yeah, and I think that is like one thing that a lot of people who happen to be of a culture that isn't white be like, oh, like I want to be vegan. I don't want to be ostracized at my family, like gatherings and stuff like that. And like in Vietnamese culture, family gatherings are such a big thing. Like even like my family is pretty open to veganism, but even when we have like a big meal together, I have my one separate dish and I eat it on the side because there isn't room for me at the table where there's like just a bunch of flesh.
Yeah.
Which is like also not one thing that I really want to participate in either, but I also want to like be present with my family, but I have to be present with my family amongst animal flesh, which is not really like it's another barrier.
Yeah, like we're not saying that like it's effortless for like all white people to immediately go vegan right now, or that it's absolutely impossible for people of color who have more sort of food rituals and like ceremonies around food, or like a more deep-rooted connection to food and their food history and food culture. There's a tendency for there to be an extra barrier there. In this case, what we're talking about is race, but if you have that marginalized identity or other marginalized identities, it's just an extra challenge that can make it more difficult, and that's important to recognize. Privilege has layers, and it's about like identities, and there are many different identities. Some of them give you advantages, some of them give you disadvantages, like your race, your gender, like how you present, if you're able-bodied or disabled, like what language you speak, like your region, if you're like comfortably affluent or living below the poverty line, like, all of these things matter and sort of inform your access to things. It's not like because I'm a white person, I automatically just like get Gardein in my freezer or anything. It doesn't work like that. But because we live in a world where the implication is that having white skin makes you a better person, that results in very like subtle but also explicit ways in me getting more access to anything. and everything.
Why do you think it's important for vegans to acknowledge privilege and like be aware of privilege?
At this point, there are people doing like really good work, like intersectional work in the vegan world, but mostly, and unfortunately, it's very like parallel to like mainstream pop culture and mainstream media and stuff. The representatives we usually see, like you were just saying, are often like very heteronormatively gendered, white, thin, have access to like whatever gym memberships and organic kale and like all this stuff. That is a very, very small and privileged portion of the population here. And so if those people are the only ones we see representing veganism, it becomes an exclusionary movement. And for people with marginalized identities looking into this movement, they may feel less welcome. And also, like we were touching on in the beginning, veganism needs to be intersectional because it has to do with privilege, and it has to do with environmental justice and ethical justice for animals, and also like capitalism, because food is political and it is economic, and there's no denying that. So it's part of all of these other systems that are also corrupt and that we also need to shut down. And also, who tends to be vegan? Okay, like people who identify as women or like femme people, and that has to do with what's allowed in the gender binary, how we're allowed to express ourselves. And then there's the whole thing about like, you know, men need meat and whatever, and then there's like toxic masculinity there. So it's not just about like food, it's about everything. And so to pretend that it's not, or to ignore that it's not, is just missing out on a lot of opportunities to make it a more powerful movement that's part of other ones.
A lot of people who are advocates for the vegan lifestyle will try to spread that message to as many people as they can, and they'll often encounter people who aren't privileged enough to be able to be vegan. You know, they might live in a community that doesn't physically have access to fresh food, or they might not have access to like organic tofu and like beans,
or the time to cook, or
or like
learning about veganism, being able to watch documentaries, read books, read articles,
access to internet, access to a high-speed powered blender, which is like apparently required. Like that was something that I noticed because I didn't have a high-speed powered blender until like last year, and like all of the recipes online require that, and like I hated that I had to get one because I felt like I wasn't creating recipes that were like beautiful enough, or like, you know, like I couldn't make seriously, like I couldn't make green smoothies without like chunky kale. Actually, I remember last year when you came, I hope I didn't make fun of you. No. I made like a big green smoothie, and I was so proud of myself because I was like, oh my god, this actually tastes good. But I was like, it's chewy, what's going on? And I was like, what the heck? And like I had like a Ninja blender, which is like why I hate the Ninja blender now, because like the full size blender doesn't blend all the way, but the smaller one does, using the same motor. So I painstakingly re-blended the entire thing in the small blender, just because I was like, oh my god, like Emily is like used to using a Vitamix, and I'm like hosting them, and I like I don't have like a good like green smoothie, like what am I doing? I'm a horrible, like, I mean, it's very trivial, but it's, you know.
No, that's like a great point, because that's another thing. Not only are so many of the people we see in public spaces like doing veganism, there's also this implication that there's like a right way and a wrong way to do and be vegan. And that's just another space where it becomes an exclusionary like movement or whatever, lifestyle or whatever. There's so much like convincing of like weight loss and stuff to like, you know, go vegan, you'll lose weight, and like la la la, and it's like, you know, go vegan like for your health and stuff. And it's like, it's sizist and fatphobic and like healthist and elitist. And I feel like there's, for some vegan folks who identify as like vegan activists or advocates, it's almost like there's this idea of like, you know, spread the message at whatever cost. And like
at the cost of exploiting women, or like identifying them. Like it's just all kind of all the systems.
This is such a fun video. I mean, I struggle with this as a femme person living in the world, but also as a vegan, but also as a person with mental illness. I struggle with disordered eating and my relationship to my body and food. And veganism really didn't help that. It made it worse at the beginning.
Yeah, because it is a restrictive diet. Like when you're first coming into it, the health benefits of like going vegan. Like I find that like the ethical and the environmental reasons to go vegan are a much stronger argument because you know all of our bodies are so different. Not everyone's body will thrive on like a raw vegan diet, or like ideally everyone's body would thrive on a whole foods plant-based diet, but that's not always the case. Some people can't, you know, digest fiber, and like, you know, fiber is a pretty essential component to a vegan diet. As someone who has pretty severe eczema, being a representative, I mentioned this in the last video, but being a representative of the vegan movement, being like, oh, you should go vegan, and all these other people are saying like, go vegan for your health, you're gonna have glowing skin and beautiful hair, and like you're gonna be super skinny, and like I don't really have any of that, and like I feel like I'm not like adequate. I feel like I'm like not a good enough advocate for the vegan movement because I don't have these things, and like I'm not like marring, I guess, the message, because I'm like, I'm not this like beautiful.
You're not fitting into these rigid gendered beauty norms.
And like I think that it's important to note that like not everyone is vegan for health, and like sure, veganism has helped my health in many ways, but in a lot of ways like that's not why I'm vegan.
I feel like it's when we just see this like narrow idea of like what it looks like to be and do veganism, like to be a vegan and do veganism, it is just excludes everybody else, or at the you know, very least makes people feel like unwelcome, or that they're doing it wrong, and like
definitely,
you know, for the people that's going to happen to, they're probably already dealing with other stuff in the world, not even in the context of being vegan, where they're told you're not good enough, la 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 la, and then they have to go and check out the vegan movement, and then they see, oh great, it's like it looks the same. You don't know where other people are coming from. You don't know the place other people are coming from because you don't know their life, and especially if you're a person with a lot of privileged identities, you don't really have much ground to stand on to tell other people, especially people who have marginalized identities, how they should eat and how they should live, because you won't have to deal with the barriers that they have to deal with thanks to your privileged identities.
And it's not just like white people who are privileged. Like there are plenty of people who are white and identities. Do not have a lot of privilege. Like,
for sure. Exactly. Again, I don't want to say like all people can do, or all white people have like a ton of money and can do whatever they want and stuff. It has been designed on an institutional level to benefit white people, to benefit straight people, to benefit men, to benefit able-bodied people, etc. And so there are tendencies for people with these identities that give you privilege. Okay, so it's not, so I want to make that clear. I don't want to like upset people. We're not, and we don't mean to generalize. And also, I don't want to pretend that there are no people who have marginalized identities not doing great works. There are. It's just, unfortunately, they are not. They're sort of like the exception to the rule. But I mean, they're, like AFCO is like, she did true. Black Vegans Rock, and then I think her blog is Afroism, which is so good. And then like Rad Fat Vegan is like, you know her in Israel. She's like one of my favorite people. So like the representation, it's not that it doesn't exist, it's just so unfortunately small. And like, because this movement is about justice, we need to like do a better job of like representing people who need justice the most.
It's great for people who are privileged to speak up on behalf of the animals. Like that is a privilege that we have and we should take advantage of. But it's important to address that like not everyone is in the place where they can meet those expectations.
Like, I guess I feel like for vegans who are watching this, or people who are watching this or whatever, who are like, I only care about the animals and that's what's most important for me and that's where my priorities lie. Okay, but like ask yourself why you care about the animals so much. Because they are fellow mammals who are being systemically oppressed and abused and not given freedom or justice. We agree, we are both vegan people. That's screwed up and that's not okay. This is part of why we're vegan. But if you care about that, then you really should care about other social justice movements. And you should care about Black Lives Matter, strengthening and supporting the sovereignty of Indigenous nations, doing what we can for queer communities, etc., right? There's so much work to do, and for people who are vegan and think that that's what their main thing is, it probably is in line with a lot of other social justice movements. So in fact, maybe you don't think intersectionality is for you or whatever, or you're just gonna keep focusing on the animals or whatever, it would make sense for you to actually get involved in any ways you can, or at least just acknowledge that you should care about other justice movements.
Yeah, and the thing with like social justice is that like we are all stronger when we stand together. That is the idea of solidarity. So like even as a vegan advocate, like, you know, I don't identify as Black, obviously, because I'm Asian, but like I made a post about Black Lives Matter because it just kind of got to a point where like I need to use my platform to help spread the message and stand in line with the Black Lives Matter movement, because like it doesn't take energy to support those movements because those are naturally in line with the same sort of values that we have like when we believe in veganism. I
try to do what I can in these other social justice movements, and the intersectionality in them is usually there. Of course, each movement has sort of their own problems and stuff, and their like white feminism is a thing and it's really not cool, and like sometimes there is like sizeism in other like social justice movements or like whatever, like, you know, but they all do generally such a good job of being intersectional, and it's disheartening to see that by and large the vegan movement isn't really doing a great job right now. And again, not to erase the people who are doing a good job, because they exist in their like thumbs up, but generally speaking, it's just not a main message that you hear. But yet in other social justice movements, it's like a main tenet of sort of the mission of the movement to be intersectional.
That's like something that we mentioned in my last video that I had with Jess, but like we talked about like how, you know, for example, PETA exploits women in order to promote the vegan message. And like, yeah, it's effective because that's kind of like what our mainstream media like is geared towards, misogyny. But it doesn't have to be, we don't have to use those forms of exploitation in order to spread the vegan message. Like, why do we need to exploit marginalized group in order to promote this, like, to promote the lives of animals? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, it's unnecessary. There are better ways to do it. I think that pretty much wraps everything up. Yeah. If you want to follow Emily's blog or Instagram, or you used to have a YouTube channel, but I don't think...
I made all the videos private, but I know some of you would like some, and I kind of want to make them again, but it'll maybe happen in the future at some point.
I mean, you can just subscribe for, like, you know, the future if you want. So
That's true. You'll get the little notification if I do something.
So I will leave a link down below if you want to check out Emily's stuff. They also have some great... They have 3 cookbooks? Yeah, 3 cookbooks. That are all amazing, mostly nut-based, so I can't really eat a lot of them, but I have seen the pictures. They look amazing. So if you want to follow Emily's things, I'll leave them down below. Be sure to check them out because, I mean, your work is just like fantastic.
Thank you.
I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please give it a like. Let us know your thoughts on veganism and privilege, and like touch on any points that we have missed, or if you want to expand on more, because there are lots of other things to talk about.
If you have any constructive feedback, like how can we do better, how can I do better, because honestly, like, everything is problematic, and I'm just trying to constantly learn and be more inclusive and more considerate. So like, if I can like tweak my language or my concepts of things, like, just, you know, let us know.
For sure. So be sure to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a delicious day. Bye.
Bye.